In today's culture, eating healthy is usually understood to mean eating less. So, what happens when you actually need to eat more and everything you've learned about good choices suddenly works against you? Hello there, I'm Monica Reinagel, and this is the Nutrition Diva podcast, a show where we take a closer look at nutrition news, research, and trends, and answer your food and nutrition questions. And I recently heard from a listener who, along with her husband, had decided to adopt a vegan diet. Now, they weren't trying to lose weight, they just wanted to eat in a way that felt healthier and more sustainable. But a year later, both of them have lost a significant amount of weight, and now they are technically underweight. Now, one of the selling points of plant-based diets is that people who follow them tend to take in fewer calories and are less likely to be overweight. And this is an appealing message in a culture that assumes everyone needs to be thinner. But for this couple, that feature turned out to be a bug. And instead of steering them toward nutritious foods that are higher in calories, their healthcare provider advised them to pick up some nutrition drinks or weight gain shakes, highly processed products that aren't exactly my idea of good nutrition. But here's the thing that we need to keep in mind. Healthcare professionals have also been steeped in diet culture, and especially for those of them who don't have training in nutrition and dietetics, the idea of recommending high-calorie foods may seem like heresy, even when it may actually be appropriate. I see a similar phenomenon among people who are using anti-obesity medications. Now, in this case, the weight loss is intentional, but the loss of appetite that some people experience on these medications can be so strong that getting enough calories and protein and other nutrients can be a real challenge. And when you have spent a lifetime internalizing the idea that low-fat, low-calorie foods are always the healthiest choices, it can feel wrong, even reckless, to intentionally do the opposite. In truth, our culture's fixation on thinness has really distorted what we think of as healthy eating. Public health campaigns, magazine headlines, even clinicians tend to equate eating well with eating less. And so we are constantly encouraged to take smaller portions or choose low and fat-free dairy products and salad dressings, or to drink water before meals so that we'll feel full faster, to choose foods that are higher in fiber and water so that we fill up with fewer calories, or to eat lots of salads and raw vegetables because they take so much longer to chew, and to choose water, tea, or other zero-calorie drinks. And none of these ideas are inherently bad, but they do all serve the same purpose, which is helping you to consume less energy. And that advice has become so deeply ingrained that sometimes we forget to stop and question whether that actually applies. Because eating healthy and eating less are not the same thing. Maintaining our health and our strength sometimes requires exactly the opposite, that we eat more in order to ensure that we are eating enough. Because overweight and obesity are so prevalent, and because of the weight bias that pervades our culture, it can be really hard for health professionals to imagine that anyone might need help eating more. And as a result, they often don't have much in the way of useful advice for people who are in that situation. And that is a gap I hope to fill in this episode. So if you are someone who actually needs to eat more in order to gain or in order to maintain your weight or to meet your nutritional needs despite having a smaller appetite, then a lot of that familiar healthy eating advice needs to be flipped on its head. So instead of trying to fill up on foods that are low in calories but take up a lot of space in your stomach, You want to make every bite count by choosing foods that pack more nutrition and more energy into a smaller package. And here are a few ways to do that. First, add more healthy fats. Foods like avocados, nuts, seeds, and nut butters are all rich in nutrients, but they are also higher in calories. So topping salads or sandwiches with sliced avocado, or adding a couple of tablespoons of peanut butter to your smoothie, or grabbing a handful of nuts and dried fruit for a snack can add a substantial number of calories without a huge increase in volume. Cook your vegetables instead of always eating them raw. Cooking removes some of the water and reduces the bulk, and that means you can eat a larger portion before you feel full. Consider, for example, how much raw spinach it takes to produce a small serving of sautéed spinach. Roasting vegetables with olive oil, or if you like, also a little garlic, adds calories and it reduces water. That makes them taste richer and more satisfying, and in my experience, that often means that you will eat more of them. If you enjoy soup, opt for blended or creamy soups instead of broth-based ones. So a pureed vegetable soup made with a bit of olive oil or cream or a nut cream will be more calorie dense than a watery broth full of floating vegetables. If you do consume dairy products, go for the higher fat versions instead of instinctively reaching for the low fat ones. Same goes for coconut milk. Don't overhydrate during your meals. Large amounts of water, tea, or diet drinks before or during your meals can fill up your stomach and then make it harder to take in enough calories. It's fine to stay hydrated, just separate that from your meals a bit. And finally, think about texture. Smoothies, dips, nut spreads, and hummus all pack calories and nutrients into foods that are a little easier to consume. These are small shifts, and they deliberately reverse the usual eat less strategies, but these can make a big difference for anyone who needs to restore lost weight or preserve muscle or simply make sure that their diet is providing enough total energy. And you might also want to check out my episode number 702, Nutrient Dense versus Energy Dense, and why it matters. Now, of course, it's not just about getting enough calories. The quality of those calories matters too, especially when it comes to maintaining lean muscle tissue. So whenever calorie intake falls below what your body needs to maintain its weight, the body is going to look for other sources of fuel. Now, some of that energy will come from burning stored fat, but some can also come from lean tissue, including your muscle. For those who are taking anti-obesity medications, where appetite and total food intake are often sharply reduced, keeping your protein intake up can be a hedge against the loss of skeletal muscle during weight loss, especially when you combine that with some sort of strength training. And for those who may be underweight or who are losing weight unintentionally, the body may not have a lot of fat stores to draw on, and low protein intake can further accelerate muscle loss. Because vegan diets tend to be lower in protein as well as lower in calories, this can be a double whammy. Beans and legumes, for example, are often a primary source of protein in vegetarian diets, and all that fiber is great for your microbiome, but it can also fill you up before you've gotten enough protein or calories. Tofu, tempeh, and seitan are more concentrated sources of plant-based nutrition, and protein powders are another concentrated source of protein that can be helpful for both plant-based eaters and omnivores. But the main thing I want you to take away from today's episode is that healthy eating is not always about eating less or minimizing calories. Sometimes it's about making sure that we are eating enough. And the solution here isn't to turn to high-calorie, low-nutrition junk food. It's to choose those foods that are both nutrient-dense and energy-dense. And that sometimes requires us to unlearn a lot of what our society tells us about what it means to eat healthy. My thanks to Susan for sending in this great question. And if you have a question or topic you'd like me to tackle on the podcast, you can email me at nutrition@quickanddirtytips.com. And if you'd like to find out about having me speak at your next in-person or virtual event, you can learn more at wellnessworkshere.com. Nutrition Diva is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast. Holly Hutchings is our director of podcasts. Steve Riekeberg is our audio engineer. Morgan Christensen heads up podcast operations and advertising. Rebecca Sebastian is our manager of marketing and publicity. And Nat Hoops is our marketing and operations assistant. Thanks to all of them, and thanks to you for listening.